Saiki Kusuke is one of the most fascinating characters in the disastrous life of Saiki K. Unlike Kusuo, who was born with godlike psychic powers, Kusuke has none at all. And yet, he's the one person who can consistently challenge Kusuo through sheer intellect. So, let's break down his feats to a range of categories and see how truly smart he is. But before that, if you like this type of content, sub up. The goal is 15k, thank you. When talking about Saiki Kusuke, it's important to start from the very beginning, because unlike most characters, Kusuke's genius was there from the moment he was born. 18 years ago, before Kusuo's birth, a boy was born to a completely ordinary couple. Just 1 month after birth, he spoke his first words, saying, "I got it." And from there, it only snowballed. By the time most infants are babbling nonsense, Kusuke could already hold full conversations fluently. Imagine a 1-month-old, still wrapped in blankets, talking to his parents with perfect comprehension. But Kusuke wasn't only ahead in intelligence, but even his emotional control was freakishly advanced. When most babies cry for hours whenever they need something, Kusuke would politely ask his parents to clean him up, even expressing embarrassment for pooping himself. This shows a level of emotional regulation and social reasoning completely unheard of for a child. By the age of 2, Kusuke had already mastered the writing and mathematics you'd normally expect to see in the first few years of school. Basic equations, early literacy, and logical problem solving are all already second nature to him. And just to make sure there's no confusion about how absurd this is, Kusuke was given an IQ test at age 2 with a score of 218. For context though, an IQ of 218 doesn't line up with real-world tests like the Westler Adult Intelligence Scale, which usually tops out around 160 to 180. The series is exaggerating to drive the point home that Kusuke is meant to be seen as a super genius. Even his playtime wasn't normal. When Kusuke's parents read him a picture book, he would predict the ending of the story before it happened, as shown when he predicted the ending of Motaro. That means he could pick up and analyze patterns, understanding narrative logic, and apply foresight in real time as a baby. Already, he was anticipating outcomes, and that's a skill set we'd normally associate with tactical prodigies and masterminds, not with a baby who could barely reach the top of his crib. So before most kids even learn how to talk, Kusuke had already established himself as a super genius. It's no wonder his parents weren't particularly surprised when Kusuo was later born with psychic powers. By that point, they were already raising a prodigy. But everything changed when Kusuo was born. The arrival of a younger brother who could walk in the air, ride motorcycles at the age of 1, and casually display supernatural feats, that was something Kusuke could never compete with. Even when Kusuke excelled, be it riding a bike at 3 years old, topping report cards with perfect scores, or building robots out of scrap parts during summer vacation, Kusuo's psychic powers would overshadow him. No matter how hard Kusuke tried, he couldn't win. Not even something as simple as rock, paper, scissors. This is where Kusuke's character takes shape, because rather than giving up, he became obsessed, proving he isn't the normal one next to his expert brother. By middle school, Kusuke had already shown results from this obsession. He began investigating Kusuo's brain and body, reverse engineering how his powers worked, and ultimately created something that shaped Kusuo's character, the limiters, the ones that he still wears on his head to this day. Think about what that means. Kusuke was able to analyze psychic powers, a power completely outside the bounds of logic, and design a device that could regulate it all on his own. But still, after all of that, he didn't stand a chance against Kusuo. Then, at just 14, Kusuke skipped high school entirely and entered Cambridge University. He was an empty husk, spending every day in depravity, eventually gaining his master's at the age of 17. After that, he was working towards his PhD, pouring in all his energy into research. That's when Kusuke finally created the telepath canceller, a device that could block Kusuke's mind-reading abilities. One of Kusuke's most underrated feats happens when he's face-to-face with Kusuo while wearing the telepath canceller. Normally, Kusuo speaks to everyone through telepathy, but with Kusuke, that connection is cut off, meaning Kusuke hears nothing, and yet Kusuke responds instantly to everything Saiki thought of. Remember, he can't hear any of what we've heard from the anime or what you read in the manga, yet Kusuke carries on the conversation flawlessly, as if Kusuo's telepathy were still working, meaning Kusuke is reading Kusuo's intentions, filling in the blanks, and answering in real time with such accuracy that it's as if he doesn't even have the telepath canceller on. What Kusuke demonstrates here lines up with emotional intelligence. First, he reads Kusuo's subtle expressions and context cues instantly, picking up on what isn't spoken. Next, he interprets the intent behind Kusuo's silence, grasping not just what Kusuo wants to say, but why he wants to say it. Finally, his replies are timed and phrased so naturally that the flow of dialogue never breaks, managing the exchange to feel like a normal back and forth conversation. And he has shown to do this so consistently throughout the series. A good example comes from Season 2, Episode 21, where I initially forgot that Kusuke couldn't even hear what Saiki was saying/thinking, with how seamlessly he answered to his every thought. He didn't miss a single moment Saiki thought/said something towards him. And this isn't a one-off thing just for Kusuo. Teruhashi's gag archetype is that everyone who sees her beauty unconsciously says ofu, but Kusuke hasn't said it once after meeting her. But then, out of nowhere, Kusuo says it. And here's the important part. He doesn't know about Teruhashi's archetype, yet he times the line at the exact moment Teruhashi is internally panicking over him not saying that out loud. Meaning, Kusuke was perfectly reading her thought process or emotional state and responding in a way that dismantles her entire self-image, albeit still being attacked by Angel's tears afterwards. To add more from the festival scene, at the shooting games, Kusuo shows more of his genius. The instant he pulls out the massive laser gun he made and is about to shoot, he already knows Kusuo's next move with absolute certainty and baits that exact reaction. And then comes the calculation. Kusuke anticipates the trajectory of the psychic bullet itself, meaning he would have had to mentally run through the physics in real time. From the angles, the velocity, the ricochet potential, a decently layered cognitive process. Sure, he's a little off on the force and trajectory, but that almost doesn't matter. The fact lies in how close he got. Kusuke essentially calculated and executed a counter to a move that hadn't even been made yet, against someone with supernatural powers. Next up, I want to quickly go over a feat that shows Kusuke's reasoning ability. When Kusuo was supposed to have died 3 years ago, he suddenly appeared alive in front of Kusuke. Now, he is confronted with a contradiction, yet he immediately begins to work on the problem. First, he tests the obvious explanation. Could Kusuo have been revived? It would make sense given his psychic powers, but Kusuo looks older than he did before. Resurrection alone doesn't add up. From there, he pivots to something more layered, being the butterfly effect. Then he ties everything together with abduction. If none of the straightforward explanations hold, then the only possibility left is that this Kusuo isn't of this world at all. He must be from a different timeline. And remember, he isn't told what Kusuo did. He builds the entire model in real time, through nothing but inference, showing high levels of inductive reasoning, pulling the most plausible theory out of fragmented, impossible evidence. Although, while to anyone else this would have been pure speculation, for Kusuke, it's abductive reasoning applied through a lens of scientific expertise, because he's aligning psychic anomalies with what he already knows about temporal mechanics and time travel, since he has already made a time machine himself. But he can only go back in time one day. But to add on to this, when Saiki got back from the main timeline and Kusuke saw him on a video, he yet again accurately said, "You look like you just came back from a time slip," which was exactly the case. Now, when it comes to memory, Kusuke shows two very different but equally impressive sides of recall. First, we have his ability to track time or events. In one scene, when talking with his grandparents, Kusuke casually states that it had been 6 years and 95 days since their last meeting. Now, his grandfather obsessively keeps track of Kusuke and Kusuo, so it wouldn't be strange if he remembered or kept a note of that number. But Kusuke doesn't particularly care about them, meaning he simply calculated and remembered the exact time elapsed down to that day. This level of memory is almost like a built-in computer or an event clock in his brain, automatically recording the passage of time with no effort. But then, on the other hand of the spectrum, we see Kusuke's memory when his emotions are involved. Specifically, whenever it comes to Kusuo, Kusuke is obsessed with competing against his little brother, so every win and loss matters to him. And sure enough, he remembers the exact breakdown of thousands of games. Rock, paper, scissors was 0 wins, 725 losses. Card games were 279 losses. Video games are 189 losses. He also remembers that he has thrown scissors exactly 104 times, and that rock is Kusuo's least used hand overall. By the end, Kusuke tallies it all up. 0 wins, 4,254 losses. That level of detail shows near perfect total recall, especially given how many different categories of games he kept track of. Now, we should note that this second feat is heavily reinforced by emotional salience. Because Kusuke is so fixated on Kusuo, it makes sense that his brain would encode and perceive these losses with more accuracy. It's still impressive nonetheless, bordering on near perfect memory. Maybe not perfect memory, but close to it. Now, here's a feat from Kusuke that's a little more subtle, but honestly kind of terrifying once you think about it. When he shows up in this small town full of elderly people, he helps them by outfitting the entire town with cutting-edge technology. Everything from powered suits, advanced medicine, and even robotic dogs, all under the gaze of making their lives easier. On the surface, it looks like he's just trying to make their lives more comfortable, but what's really happening here is manipulation. By easing them into using his devices, he lowers their resistance, earns their trust, and makes them dependent on him. Over time, that transforms them into loyal pawns, a disguised army he can deploy against Kusuo if he needs to. This is where Kusuke's intelligence takes on a more tactical edge, being manipulative enough to weaponize trust, a modest showing of manipulation and general tactics. But when you put it all together, Kusuke's intelligence is a mix of clear strength and some gaps or weaknesses. On one hand, he's got high showings of FSIQ, from his near-perfect memory to his ability to solve logical problems and build world-bending inventions like the telepathic canceller or even a time machine or a dimensional traveling device. To add on to this, there is his EQ, where he can read people and respond with perfect accuracy, and you see a mind that's both sharp and emotionally tuned. But when it comes to deception, manipulation, or strategy/general tactics, his feats are more modest. We see hints of it, like reshaping an entire town of elderly citizens into allies through subtle technological dependency, but it's not emphasized as heavily as his raw intellect or EQ. Still, the fact that Kusuke could casually cause World War III by just inventing a time machine and not even really caring about it suggests the potential is always there. But on the other hand, he has also failed to catch Kusuo in tag. Some could argue that if he wanted to, manipulating people and planning global events might come just as easily to him as inventing machines. But still, there is no clear showcasing of it, so it's still hard to say for that department. He's mainly a IQ and EQ type of guy, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below.